This lecture will cover a problem in interpreting the yield to maturity. When we're thinking about yield to maturity, it's the yield or what we expect to get, or it's the promised yield if we hold the bond to maturity. However, that's deceptive. We have to consider the reinvestment of the coupons that are being paid by the bond. Let's look at a particular example. Let's look at example A. That's a pure discount bond. Now, discount bond is that bond that where the price is set below the par value. A pure discount would be a bond that has no coupon, so the price now is simply the discounted value of the one par value when the bond matures. So let's look at a bond with no coupons. Let's draw a timeline here just for visual sake. And it's a 2-year bond. And let's say that the par value here is 12.9973. Now I'm getting detailed here for illustration's sake. So I'm picking these particular numbers because they're going to be used to compare with another set of numbers. And the price is $950. So the yield to maturity for this bond is simple to calculate. It's simply the rate that makes the present value of this future value here equal to $950 given a 2-year period. And that's going to be 12.9973%. And again, it's simply the result of finding the rate in the present value formula. Like that. So the yield to maturity here suggests that the $950 will return or grow by 12.9973% per year for 2 years. And it does. If we take the $950, compound it up one time at 12.9973%, then compound it again at 12.9973%, we get the 12.9973. So this is the total dollar amount received 2 years later by investing the $950. So the yield to maturity there is the yield per year if we actually get what we expect. Now let's consider a bond that pays coupons. With no coupons, with coupons. Let's take the same $950 price and let's say this bond pays coupons of $100 at the end of every year for 2 years and then receives a $1,000 par value. So at the end of 2 years, we have a total cash flow of $1,100. So the yield to maturity here $100 coupon at the end of every year for 2 years and then receives the $1,000 par value 2 years from now. So here the coupon is, not the coupon, but the yield to maturity is found by solving for the rate in this formula. And the yield to maturity here is 12.9973%. Now you see where I came up with the cash flows of bond A. In other words, we start off with bond B, a regular coupon bond that pays a constant coupon for 2 years, then receives $1,000 at the end of the second year. It has a yield to maturity of 12.9973%. So for illustration's sake and for comparison purposes, I wanted to make a bond that paid no coupons but resulted in the same yield to maturity, and that's where I got the 12.9973. Okay, so we have one bond that doesn't pay any coupons. Its yield to maturity is 12.9973, and we have another bond, same price, same yield to maturity, and this 12.9973% again also suggests that the $950 will grow by this 12.9973% per year for 2 years. However, it's misleading. Now, that means if we invest $950 at period 0 and given this particular rate every year for 2 years, then how much money should we end up with at the end of 2 years? That's why I gave you bond A. We should end up with 12.9973, $1,212.99.73. But it doesn't. Look at it. Let me erase this right here. Make some room. At the end of 2 years, what do we have? We have a total of $1,200. The only way that we can make our 12.9973%, or in order for us to get this 1212, what must happen? Yes, we have to earn that yield to maturity on this $100 coupon. So 12.9973% on $100 gives us $12.9973. Add that to 1,100, and that's where we get our 12.9973. And so the yield to maturity, in order for us to interpret that rate, well, we just have to be careful in interpreting that particular yield to maturity. What does it mean? Okay, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be getting the 1212 total cash flow, total value 2 years from now. It depends on what rate you're going to be using to compound or reinvest that $100 there. Okay, so in order for the bond to actually yield the yield to maturity, through maturity, the coupons must be reinvested at the yield to maturity. Now, let's look at another particular example. Suppose that our, oops, it always does that. I wonder why it does. Go back to there, let's try it again. Let's suppose our rate here, what's happening? All right, there we go. Oh, I'm clicking up here in the corner. That's where it's going back. I'm going back to the previous page. Let's say our rate here is 8% at t equals 1. What do I mean by that? Well, we have our $950 price. We have our $100 coupon, and total $1,100 2 years from now. And we have our yield to maturity of 12.9973%. So that means at the current time, the rate that we can use to discount these cash flows over 2 years is 12.9973% for each year for 2 years. But 1 year from now, when we receive the $100, that doesn't necessarily mean that we can reinvest that $100 at the 12.9973%. Suppose the rate in year 2 is 8%. If that's the case, then we can reinvest our $100, even if it's a similar bond. And bonds like this, their yield to maturity now is 8%. We talked about that before. Then we can only get 8% for that second year, so our total amount is $1,208. And that's still short of our 1212.9973. And if we calculated our rate of return that we made, in other words, we ended up with 1208, we started off with 950. What's our rate per year over 2 years? That rate's going to be 12.7643%, not the 12.9973. And so again, the only way to earn the yield to maturity of 12.9973% over 2 years is to reinvest the coupons at that particular rate. And so the yield to maturity, think about this, the yield to maturity is really only the yield to maturity on the cash flows that remain invested in the bond or invested in an investment or bond with the same return as the yield to maturity. Okay? So think about this. Let's widen out our timeline here with our, oh, you didn't? Let's go back to the previous page. All right, finish getting that. All right. Now we go back to our price of $9.50. And we have here 1, 2. Let's look at the dynamics of the yield to maturity of these cash flows and where our return is coming from. We have the $950, and the yield to maturity suggests that we need to be earning 12.9973% per year for 2 years. So let's say that we earn 12.9973% for this first year. Then what should the value be of our investment 1 year from now? We'll just take the present value of the $950 given the 12.9973%, and that's going to come out to be $1,073.47. So your investment should grow from $950 to $1,073. Now what happens at year 1? At the end of year 1, what do you get? The $100 coupon. And where is that coming from? The bond. So now you have an investment that is valued at $1,073.47, or it should grow to $1,073.47 because that's what you're returning here. That's what the yield to maturity says it should be growing to. But then what happens? The yield to maturity says, yes, it will grow by 12.9973%. But then after 1 year, what happens? You lose $100. That $100 is no longer part of the investment, no longer part of the bond. So the amount that you have the amount that remains invested in the bond is $973.47. And so the yield to maturity says you should be earning, or we should be earning, 12.9973% on what? On the amount that we still have invested in the bond. And so that should be growing at a rate of 12.9973% for 1 year. And that's going to give us $1,100. For Yeah, this right. Now this one right. No, this one right here. The 950. No, we're just compounding it up one time. That's the 950, and we're compounding it at 1.129973 one time. That gives us 1073.47. In other words, we are learning how to interpret what this yield to maturity is saying. This yield to maturity is suggesting that the 950 will grow at 12.9973%. And here's where people misunderstand the yield to maturity. They're thinking, well, that means once we have the 1073 over here at year one, the yield to maturity suggests that we should be earning 12.9973 on the 1073.47. If it did, we would be getting our 1212.9973 as in the bond with no coupons. But that's a misleading interpretation. It's not saying that. It's only saying that we are compounding what at the 12.9973? This right here. The amount that remains invested in the bond. Question back there, comment? Oh, that's our coupon payment there. This right here is our coupon payment. This is for the coupon bond. So we're paying $950 now. We're receiving $100 at year one, $100 at year two, and also our $1,000. And so the amount that that remains invested in the bond then should be growing at 12.9973%, and we see that it does. So if we see a bond that requires an investment of $950, $100 coupon every year for 2 years, and then $1,000 par value, yes, we will, and we hold that to maturity, we will make 12.9973%, but only on the cash flows that remain invested in the bond. If we pull out any of our investments, you see, any of that cash flow from the bond, such as a coupon, we're not going to be making what we think we should make, is the idea. And it's very simple. For instance, you go to your friend and say, look, I just invested $100. I put it in a CD with this bank. I'm going to make 10%. I'm going to get $110 1 year from now. Yes, that means if you hold it 1 year from now, if you hold it until maturity, you're going to be getting your $110 back, and you make your 10%. But what happens when 6 months from now you say, hey, I need some money. I'm going to take out $5. I'm going to go to the bank and say, I want to take out $5 from that particular investment. Well, you're going to be making 10%, ignoring any fees and penalties and things like that. But if you take out $5, you're still going to be making your 10%, or half the 10% for the remainder of the year, but only what is left, right, in the investment. And that's how we should interpret the yield to maturity. Okay? So to consider the yield to maturity to be the yield on the full $950, that's what we're misinterpreting the yield to maturity. A lot of people do. The yield to maturity is not the rate of return on the full $950 over 2 years. It's the $950 and whatever cash flows remain in that investment. Any questions? Yes. Now, some people would say this in regarding the problems to yield to maturity, and that is the yield to maturity assumes that the coupons are reinvested at the yield to maturity. Well, that really depends on how you interpret the yield to maturity. If you know what's happening and you say that's yield to maturity, 12.9973%, and I know it's the return only on the cash flows that remain invested in the bond, I'm not making any assumptions about what my coupons are reinvested at. But if you want to interpret the yield to maturity as the rate on the $950 for the full 2 years, then yes, you do have to reinvest those coupons at the 12.9973%. To get, in other words, if you start off with $950 here, and you want something at the end of year 2, so that you've made 12.77, 12.9973% per year for 2 years, right? I forgot the first part of my sentence. Let me start over again. What direction was I headed in? I said about half of a sentence, and then I figured out I couldn't remember what my first sentence was, so I really couldn't complete it. Yeah. If you want to make 12.9973% per year for 2 years on this 950, so that you get the 12.7793, you have to reinvest any dividends, any cash flows at the 12.9973. Okay. Now I know. My yield to maturity lecture says go back and look. It says, because when I make these notes, I go back. Well, I need to make. I'll make a note. I'll make some notes for the second lecture. Then I'll come back and make notes for the first lecture. And so I've got problems with yield to maturity. Oh, here we go. Where's it at? Problems with yield to maturity. 2. Intro to yield to maturity. 1. This lecture addresses the second condition. What? Now, problems with yield to maturity 1. Here's just what I should have talked about first. Let me see if we need to go over this. In order to realize yield to maturity, we must hold the bond to maturity, right? And 2, reinvest any income from the bond at the yield to maturity. That's what we just got to talking about. Okay, so this lecture addresses the first condition. So this is really the first condition, mentioned second. So if you want the 12.9973%, you have to hold the bond to maturity. Go back over here to the example of well, let's just look at this particular case here. I may have used this one. Since we already have this in our notes, I'm going to go just use this particular example. We buy the bond at $9.50. The yield to maturity is 12.9973%. But let's say we want to sell it 1 year from now. Oh, we don't have to go over to that one. We just go to the one we left off with. This one right here. Go to that right there. Suppose we wanted to sell the bond 1 year from now. What would we sell it for? Yeah, well, it depends on if you have the coupon or don't have the coupon. If that's the clean price, dirty price, whatever. But if you sell the bond 1 year from now and it still claims the coupon hasn't been paid yet, then you can sell it for $1073.47. Okay. If you sell it and you have the coupon, you get $973.47. Either case, you sell the bond for $973.47, but you still receive $100 in cash. Your total investment worth 1 year from now, whether all in bond or some in bond and some in cash, is $1073.47. So what type of return is that? You went from $9.50. Stop. You didn't go all the way to year 2. You went from $9.50 to $1073.47. So what's your holding period return there? What did you make? And that's going to be, you calculate it yet? $12.9968%. What's that? Which one? This right here, the 10. Oh, I just saw for R here. In other words, isolate that R, 1073.47, 950 minus 1 equals R. What if the rates, go back over to the previous one. Okay. Here, what if the rate changed to 8% during the second year? Then what's the value of the bond then at year one? Well, then the price of the bond would be the 1100. Let me start down here. The price of the bond at period one would be equal to the 1100 divided by the 1.08. And that's 1,018.52. So instead of getting the 1073.47, you're getting the 1018.52. And that's going to give you .21%. And this right over here, this is a rounding issue here. Hold up. This right, I think this right here, my number's off. This may be, it should be 8 right there, perhaps. So this right here should be the 70, that yield to maturity there, 73%. But how much you can sell it for, 1073, depends on the yield to maturity. If your yield to maturity is still 12.9973%, then the value is 1073.48, and you can make that yield to maturity, assuming that you still, the bond still has the yield to maturity in year two. If it doesn't, like over here on this one, if the rates changed 8%, then you make your 7.21%. Oh, wait, whoa, made an error there. What is it? That's the price of the bond. What are we forgetting here for our return? We bought the bond at $9.50. We can sell it at $10.18.52. We got a $100 coupon there, right? Thought something was funny with that 7.21%. That's 1118.52 about 950 equals minus 1. 17 points, that's more like it. Because the rates went down, what should happen to the value there? Go up. 17.74, 17.74%. So this right here will be your capital gain. In other words, you bought the bond at a price of $9.50. The price goes from $9.50 to $10.18.52. So you made a capital gain of 7.21%, and then the remaining amount there, the 10 point whatever percent is, comes from your coupon. You made your current yield there. All right, anything else?